Welcome to another Agile Oxfordshire Meetup. In today's session, we are hosting Chris Stone, the virtual Agile coach, who is going to talk to us about how to engage people in remote retrospectives. Chris, welcome, and the floor is yours.
For me, I'm a big believer in making remote retrospectives engaging and immersive. And my formula for that is creative or engaging retrospectives equals a bit of creativity plus immersion. So in terms of an agenda for tonight, this is going to be very interactive. I don't like just talking at people. I want to engage with you instead. Same way I do retrospectives. So tonight we're going to cover why. Bit of a Simon Sinek quote there for you, but start with why. Why do engaging retrospectives? That's where we begin. We're going to find out a little bit about you guys. We're then going to choose a theme for a new retrospective that we as a group are going to create entirely together. So it'll be a community-owned retrospective that we can create, and I'll walk you through how I do that. We'll obviously create that retrospective, and then I always intend to leave people with actionable takeaways, things that you can try differently in your working lives, something that's useful for you to actually use. What I'm going to do is just give you a quick whistle-stop tour of this mirror board for everyone's awareness. Whilst you're on here, I can see there's 10 people that have joined so far. The link is in the mirror in the Zoom chat, sorry, for you to access that. Whilst we're talking, you do have the ability to navigate your way around. So if I show you, for example, here on the boards, and I can bring everyone to me here, there are lots of different retrospective themes that I've already created, and these are all freely accessible to you. They're not behind a paywall. Anyone can download these, access them, and run them in a plug-and-play style with your own team. So there's Harry Potter, there's Guns N' Roses, there's Diwali for the diversity and inclusion side of things. I did this for back end of last year, and people loved it, especially people from that part of the world. The majority of retrospective templates I've seen out there were all very westernized, and this was one of the first ones they'd seen that were focused on that part of the world, their culture. So they loved it, and it created a lot of engagement. So you'll be able to see, and if you press the button in the top right hand corner here, and there is other links throughout this mirror board as well, you can access my website where you can download all of these templates for free and use them as you wish. If you do get bored, I'm scrolling out a bit now, I've given you guys the ability, a bit of a playground style, to build your own retrospective theme or build your own retrospective. So you could just jump onto here and take any one of these musical themed retrospectives, combine the questions from the Daft Punk one, get lucky, what were we lucky with in the last iteration, how can we make our own luck in the next one, or harder, better, faster, stronger, what could we be doing harder, faster, better, stronger as a team. You could take that question, combine it with something from the Queen retrospective, we are the champions, what kudos do we want to give, what should we celebrate, what successes should we celebrate, and basically build your own retro template that you can use for your teams in some of the available templates towards the bottom here. So if you do get bored, feel free to navigate around there. I aspire for that not to be the case. Anyway, coming to why do remote retrospectives? Well, to keep things fresh. Just by way of, you can speak out loud, you can type in the chat, you can post something in the mirror board. How many of you have been in a retro where it's very stale and it's what do we need to keep doing? What do we need to stop doing? What are we going to start doing? What am I sad about, mad about, glad about? How many of you those have you been in those? How many of you have been in those sorts of retrospectives where it's the same style?
Yeah,
I can see
definitely.
hands up. I can see hands up. I can see voices or hear voices. Yeah. Why do you creative retros? Because to keep things fresh. If you find you're doing the same style over and over and over, people will disengage, they'll switch off. And particularly in this, again, remote working world where there are distractions here, there, and everywhere, and it can be very easy to get distracted by a ping on a Slack channel or something like that and to switch off a little bit in the middle of a meeting. I know it's unprofessional, but we all do it. To keep things fresh, the more you keep things fresh and engaging, the more likely people will be to stick with it, to focus, and you'll get better results as a consequence. To celebrate microcultures, and again, by way of chat, by speaking out, in a moment, I'm going to ask you guys a couple of questions, and we'll come to that momentarily, but I just want to let you know, celebrating microcultures is a great thing. To promote engagement, coming back to the keeping things fresh, if people are more interested in the topic, because a group of people like Harry Potter or video games or music, they're more likely to connect and remain engaged. to provoke different thinking. So again, stale questions, the same ones over and over and over, often will result in the same answers. Again, how many of you have been in a retrospective where the same things come up again and again and again from weeks to weeks to next, from one week to the next, because the same questions are being asked. If you ask different questions, it can provoke different answers, different results come out. And I'll give you an example. If you were in a daily stand-up with your team and you ask them the question, hey guys, what blockers do you have? And all the guys will say, no, nothing blocking me today, no impediments, and it'll just be swiftly move on, swiftly move on. If you ask that question in a slightly different way and say, hey guys, what support do you need? They might answer, oh, actually, well, I'm stuck on this a little bit, or I've been struggling with this, could I have some help? So just by asking a question in a slightly different way, it can result in different outcomes. And last of all, why make creative retros? Because I'm a firm believer that the work can be fun. With a little bit of creativity, with a little bit of immersion, you can enjoy the experience. And I'm just going to show you just a snapshot of some of the responses I've had since doing these creative retros. I create a new one every week. I must be on about 40 or something now. I've made it a mission of mine to release a new retrospective theme every week of this year. So there should be a total of 52 new ones in 2021 alone. And these are just some of the responses I've had. People saying, oh, this is awesome, did this with the team, it was great, did the Friends one, then the Star Wars one, or I'm so glad I used the Diwali retrospective, it was really well received, the team was happy to see creativity. So there's a lot of positive results that come as a consequence of just trying something a little bit differently. Now, what I have highlighted here as well is the big box in red. Now, the reason I do this is to highlight that these creative styles, they're not for everyone. You will have the occasion where someone will say, well, it's not for me. I don't, and it can feel like forced fun. Now, I would always approach that situation with empathy. I'd look to understand why it is that they're not into it. And it might be that they're feeling like it's forced fun. It might be that they want to have more of an input into the retro theme or the style. And some of my tips later will help navigate some of those experiences. But when I get stories such as people coming to me and say, hey, we used your Queen themed retrospective, and this hard-faced program manager who never cracks a smile, he admitted he loved Queen the rock band. He smiled and he connected with the content, and he was more engaging than we'd ever seen him in a meeting. So when you can get those scenarios, that's, for me, is the beauty of it. Now, on to a little bit of, and this is where I was coming to the microcultures thing. I want to learn a little about you guys. So on this Miro board, you will have the ability to double click any of these post-it notes and type something. I invite you now to answer 3 questions. What's your favorite retrospective theme? What interesting team names have people had for the teams you've worked with? And what do you geek out over? You can interact with this Miro board by ensuring you've got the blue cursor icon on the far left-hand nav panel selected, or you can press V on your keyboard and then double click any post-it note and you can type. If you prefer to do so, you can type in the Zoom chat, or you can just tell me out loud. But questions are, what's your favorite retro theme? What interesting team names have people had? And lastly, what do you geek out over? And Alistair, just going to share the Miro link with you once more. Voila, should be with you.
Thank you, awesome.
No worries. So, favorite retro theme, I'm seeing Meme Mirror, 3 Little Pigs. Bit of a classic, that one. Monopoly, I've seen that one come up recently. It's pretty cool. I've seen it shared in a few iterations now. Interesting team names, Danger Noodles. I'm guessing that's a snake reference. Koala. Dungeons and Dragons for the favorite retro theme. Music, yeah. Stonehenge Rebels, what a name. That's quite niche. It's not Stonehenge cultists, or it's not cultists, are they? They're a specific religion. Can't remember the name.
The team was meant to smash our monolith. They didn't, but that was the idea behind the name.
I get it, I get it. Deep Water Nashi, okay. T-Rex, what a theme. 4 L's, yeah. Liked, learned, lacked, longed for. Pink Floyd, awesome. What do you geek out over? Music, fish keeping, agile mindset, diving, complexity theory. Someone thinks that might have been a Spinal Tap reference, possibly not. The reason I like to do this is because it very much highlights and emphasizes my previous point. You are all a group of individuals. You each have your own likes, dislikes, interests, things you geek out over. You each, when you are combined into a team, will create a microculture. You could have a team that are avid video gamers, avid music fans. And what we should be doing is celebrating those microcultures, not hindering them. So enabling them with a bit of creativity and immersion. And it's really easy to do with a bit of practice. Right, so what I'm going to do now is bring you guys to this section of the board. And in the same way you interacted with the post-it notes previously, I want to invite you guys to choose a theme. So you could write anything here. The idea is that the theme that is dot selected by you guys, chosen by you guys as the most important one by collective consensus, will be the retro theme that we create today as a community. As examples, in the past, when I've done this workshop, I've had a Disney fairy tales retrospective created, a Great British Bake Off retrospective, and the Eurovision Song Contest retrospective. I will admit the latter two I had no idea about. The only thing I could talk about for Eurovision was nil poir, and that was about it. But co-created as a community, it was done, and pretty rapidly so. So use your imagination here, chuck in themes that you might like to do. And then what I'm going to do is allow you guys to vote. And the way we're going to vote, I'm going to create little dots, but with a twist. So to the left of the screen here, you're going to start to see little skull and crossbones appearing. This is because I recently did a Pirates of the Caribbean theme retrospective. And what I like doing as part of these virtual retrospectives, these remote retrospectives, is enabling dot voting in the theme of the retrospective you're doing. Again, adds to the immersion a little bit. So you're going to be able to dot vote. They're appearing to the left and the right, actually all over this board now. So if you're seeing one here, any of these retrospective themes that you're really keen to do, feel free to grab, left click any of these little skull and crossbones that appear on the board and drag them to the one you most want to do. I love that Hot Fuzz is there. I have actually created a Shaun of the Dead retrospective. It's not released yet, but it's there. The It Crowd. Oh, I'd love to see that one. I'm just imagining a question, just fire, ... fire with Moss typing away rather than calling the fire brigade. What's our risks? What's on fire right now? Anyway, don't let me influence you. Currently, the It Crowd is in the lead by 1 vote. We've only got 4 or 5 votes so far. Star Wars, I've already got a retro template for Star Wars, by the way, so that exists and I can share it. Ghostbusters, okay. Game of Thrones, I've already got a Game of Thrones one as well, so I can share that one. I've got a Marvel Infinity Wars one for the Marvel films one. So a few of these already exist. I don't know what Death in Paradise is, but if it's the highest voted one, we can do it. Might rely on others to help, but an Oxford themed one. I think by the looks of things, the IT crowd is going to win it.
Looks like it, doesn't it? Yeah.
It looks like it. Okay. Someone's trying to cheat by enlarging one of these skull and crossbones and making it bigger. That doesn't count. Right. We are going to create together the IT crowd as a retrospective. So I'm going to bring everyone to here. Again, this is the part where we create a retrospective theme together using some of the tips and tricks that I tend to use. You can see on the board here, this is a template. Don't worry about moving this by mistake. It doesn't matter. This is just a template. What I'm going to highlight before we start is a few areas that I build into these retrospective templates to make them as useful as possible. So for me, right at the top, probably the most important part, it's the quote there, the retrospective prime directive by Norm Keith. Is anyone familiar with this this phrase, this paragraph. I see some nods. This to me sets up the intent of the retrospective, and I always read this right at the start of a retro with anyone. I read this out to set the intent, and that is we're focusing on unconditional positive regards. We don't care why something happened. It's not about blame. Everyone did the best job they could given what they knew, their skills and abilities, the resources available in the situation at hand. So I build that into every retrospective template. I love to remind people that right at the beginning. It's great for new teams who are just getting used to doing retros for the first time to, again, set the clear outcome and the purpose of the session. It's great for existing teams to remind them. I think it's wonderful, especially when you're bringing in perhaps people that are less familiar with retros. You can see that the retro template has a team name section, a retro date, and then it tends to be around about 6 questions. Now, I always aspire for a retro to be done in an hour or less. And we'll come to the actionable takeaways portion in a little bit as to the why behind that. But these 6 questions I tend to populate into any themed retrospective. The expectation isn't necessarily that all of them are answered as part of the retrospective. They are simply prompts, questions you may ask, or the team can choose to answer as prompts, as ways of thinking differently. I always try and aspire to have a healthy mix of questions that will think about the positives as well as the negatives. I aspire to have something in there around celebrating successes. I aspire to have things around futurespection. So if there was 6 questions in a retrospective, I'd always aim to try and have at least one that focuses on what could they be doing better at, but thinking in an immersive way. What could they improve upon? If they were to imagine themselves a few weeks' time in the future, what have they done to be successful? So the futurespection side of things, something which celebrates. And I've also increasingly been looking into ways of provoking questions through different styles. And I'll give you an example. I did a Transformers themed retrospective recently. Anyone who's seen the Transformers film will know there's a Transformer called Bumblebee. Bumblebee, as a character in that film, can only speak through song lyrics, is unable to speak otherwise. So a challenge to the team in that respect is, hey, talk about how the retrospective was just using song lyrics. You can use lots of different interesting ways of doing things. You can say, as an Easter retrospective, design or decorate an Easter egg in the way you feel the last iteration went. Or futurespection, go and grab something from the kitchen which represents how you could improve in a sprint. You just get people up, moving about, thinking differently, thinking different styles. And again, for the music retrospectives, I love having music on in the background. So I was thrilled recently when a team specifically requested I create a Prodigy theme retrospective. That meant I got to play Prodigy music in the background whilst they were populating silently their answers on the board. I did have to think creatively around some of the titles. Obviously, there are certain Prodigy themes or songs that I couldn't quite convert into a business-friendly environment, but it was a fun challenge all the same. So what I'm going to do is bring everyone to, press the wrong button there. Hold on. Bring everyone to here. So this is our board we're going to use, our template we're going to use. So you can see here, pre-existing. These are my most recent retrospective templates. It's got an icebreaker built into the top. Big fan of enabling personal interaction in any meeting, not just retrospectives, but something relating to the theme tends to work well. So this was a Pirates of the Caribbean theme retrospective. So I asked people, what do you call a pirate with 3 eyes? A pirate. Yeah, so share your favorite pirate joke. And everyone shares their favorite pirate joke just as an intro. So we now have the task of turning, what was our theme again? The IT crowd. What IT crowd themed icebreaker could we ask? Any thoughts, anyone? And you can interact with the board here by grabbing one of the post-it notes and dragging it in, typing in it. You can speak out loud. That's one thing we need to achieve. We need to think of an icebreaker. We need to then think of 6 potential, anything between 4 and 6 questions that we could ask IT crowd themed around retrospectives. So again, I'm going to invite you guys to grab these post-it notes and start putting suggestions down for questions that we could ask that IT crowd related. I already noted one earlier, which was fire, and this is probably one of my favorite Moss moments. It's a quote from the IT crowd, and that would be, what risks or just do facing How are we firefighting right now? That's one question already. What I'm going to start doing is clearing up some of the imagery around Pirates of the Caribbean. And we can start also, if you prefer to do so, you can start adding from Google Images, images relating to the It crowd to make this even more immersive. Have you tried turning it on and off again? What's your favorite IT crowd character? Yeah. That's a good one. So actually, have you tried turning it on and off again? That's probably a good question to ask as part of the retrospective. You could link that to where do we need to restart something? What process do we need to try again? Where do we need to refresh something? So I'm seeing here, what else have we got? Hello, IT, have you tried turning it on and off again? Yeah, which problems keep coming up? Someone's already thought ahead. You will see as well at the bottom of this template, I've recently been introducing a rate your retro concept. The idea behind this was to allow the team, empower the team to choose how they feel the retro has gone based on a 1 to 5 rating. And you can use a fist of 5 to do this. So with a 1 being, the retro took place, some team members were missing, might have identified some improvements, the time box wasn't respected, all the way up to a 5 where everyone contributed without fear of judgment. So there was inbuilt psychological safety, the time box was respected, actions were identified with owners, and the team celebrated successes and failures or reflected on challenges. I've introduced this more recently, and I think it's a good concept that I'm going to keep building into my retros because I think it's one way of making it immersive. You can see here I chose pieces of 8 as your rating mechanism for the Pirates of the Caribbean one. We can easily find an equivalent for the It crowd, I'm sure. I think it's just a great way. Okay, on and off button, brilliant. The internet, that's the internet button, if I recall.
It is the internet button.
It is the internet button. There we go. So we've got our internet button as our rating system. I like that's the episode where they managed to get Jen to introduce that as the internet to everyone in an IT company. Genius.
Gotta get that.
So for those of you that haven't seen the It crowd, I appreciate this might be a challenge, but there's no reason you can't be involved, and you could search for imagery around the IT crowd and chuck them in here to make this nice and immersive. Which character best describes how you feel about the last sprint? Interesting. Favorite quote, love that, it's a good one. Right, so let's try and distill some of these into retro questions then. So we've got the fire one. So would someone mind finding either a GIF or an image of Moss typing fire? And we can add that next to this one. Fire, exclamation mark, fire. And what was the point? What problems did you come up? There we go. Image of Moss, let's get that to the left over there. I love that the fire extinguisher is on fire. Someone's altering the icebreaker section, that's cool. Any other thoughts or any questions we could ask that are IT crowd related? They can be quotes from the show, they can be about characters, they can be all sorts of things. So we've got a picture of Jen and shoes. What was the Jen and shoes thing about again?
She wasn't wearing her size.
Didn't she buy those and it like crippled her feet?
Yep. He
Okay.
didn't care. It was just like they're pretty.
So how could we phrase that into a question relating to a team? Some good pictures coming up.
What has crippled the team? What looked good?
Team?
What looked good, but
what looks good but isn't delivering value, or what looks good but isn't helping us? So, and we got the picture of the shoes there. There we go. So we got two of the 4 questions. We've got I can't remember his name. What's the Gothic character's name? It's played by Noel Fielding. Someone will know this. The last on exercise was never.
Yeah, I thought this one could be a good question about maybe training, or like when is the last time you learned, or
Yeah, okay. So because there's I shared this recently today, actually. There's a great image of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of his is around the concept of the source. So where are you investing in your mental, physical, etc. health, and making time for your learning? Just try and walk it into the back of the net. Again, love that quote. So how can we rephrase that into a retro question? Always trying to walk it into the back of the net. It's like trying to perfect everything. It's like gold plating a solution. I can hear Moss's voice saying this. The thing about Arsenal is they always try and walk it in the back of the net.
we're just not taking any risks.
playing it safe, right? Playing it safe all the time, right?
Yeah, not taking any risks, I guess.
So where are we playing? Where are we playing it safe? Safe. Sensible risks could we take? We've got what's lurking behind the red door? What are we afraid of? So that's almost like again a bit of futurispection. Richmond Avenel, great name. And someone's added in, I'm not sure what this one is in the bottom right corner, an image there.
It's a help desk.
It's a help desk. So could we rephrase this into where could we help each other better?
Yeah.
Okay. And again, I like this as a question for teams because often it's always focused on what can we do better, what we're not doing, how can we help each other more? I always find it's a good question. All right, so what we've done there is, with a bit of crowdsourcing, we've created a number of potential questions you could ask a team around the IT crowd as a show, with a nice theme, very IT related, of have you tried turning on and off again? For anyone in the development side of things, I'm sure you can all appreciate how true that question is. And there's another question there. So what I like to emphasize here is that you can create new retrospective themes relatively easily, relatively co-created. You can do this with your team, and that comes to one of my actionable takeaways, which I'll bring you guys to now. So you should be seeing here, I've got 5 things listed here. A little less conversation, a little more action. To quote that infamous Elvis song, I am a big fan of shortening retrospectives. The reason is, I've seen retrospectives where they're an hour and a half, 2 hours long. I've been part of them. And again, coming back to the points earlier on, particularly in this remote working world, it's easy to disengage. Our attention spans are not designed to remain focused for that long anyway. So I'm a big believer in shortening and sharpening the focused conversation to anything between 45 minutes and an hour. Now, again, the templates that I build and I create, the expectation isn't that all of the questions are answered perfectly. It's that the team uses the time box to answer those questions and ultimately pull out actions from them that they pull into their sprints their next sprint and prioritize accordingly. If they're not doing that, if no action is being taken, often what you'll find is that the team are talking about the same things over and over in the next retrospective and the one after that, because they're not doing anything differently. And this is where I come back to another quote, a favorite of mine from Einstein. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. So if you find a situation where a team you're working with is reluctant to change, or perhaps is regularly saying the same things over and over at retrospectives, invite them to explore why. Why have they not taken actions to improve? And often it's because they talk about things in a retrospective, but then it just disappears and they don't think about it for a few weeks. Whereas what we want is visibility. We want to see those retrospective items actually on the backlog alongside other potential work, exposed on a daily basis via the stand-ups, and you can check in as a consequence. If they're not prioritized alongside the other work to do, odds are they might be forgotten about, or they're not important enough. Next thing I like to do is empower the team to select the next format. You'll have seen from the template I had there was a section in the bottom right-hand corner that said ideas for next retro format. Now, what I tend to do, because I've created loads and loads of these things, I tend to populate a few in there that they can select, or I'll leave open, and sometimes they choose new ones they want to do. So that's how I end up creating a Prodigy themed one, a Transformers themed one. So empowering the team to choose the next formats often means, again, they'll be more engaged as a consequence because it's their decision, not something that's forced upon them. Create retros with your team. Again, if you've got a team that are up for this, they're a bit more mature, and not necessarily if they're the mature, if they would like to do so. One of my favorite things to do is ask the team, and that's something reinforced heavily in Lisa Adkins' book, Coaching Agile Teams. Ask the team what they want and create things with them. So you can sit down with them quite easily and say, hey guys, let's create a retro together, and you can think of one together. And again, because they've been part of that, they're likely to be more engaged as a consequence. Now, the next point here, extending engagement beyond retrospectives. You can create your own team language. And what I mean by this is, it doesn't have to just stop at retrospectives with the immersion. If you've got a team name that's around Marvel, and the team have done some retrospectives in Marvel, it might be that the team are estimating user stories as well, and they're estimating, and rather than saying a 1, 3, 5, 8, 13 in Fibonacci sequence, they could be saying, hey, that's an Ant-Man, that's a tiny thing, or that's a Hulk, it's huge, it's massive, it's a Thanos, it's giant, it's large. You can extend the engagement by having the team's own language that they use. And last of all, a little bit of creativity goes a long way. So again, coming back to some of the responses I've had, the overwhelming responses from people loving these retro templates, they obviously go down well, so you don't have much to lose by trying it out. Again, there will be some situations where people might not necessarily resent, but they might be resistant to it. Ask why. Start with unconditional positive regard in the same way we do with the prime directive at the beginning of a retro. Seek to understand why they might not be as interested, and go from there. But in my experience, they're very well received because it's interesting, it's different. When meetings are just same, and you're bouncing from one meeting to the next, something a little bit different every now and then keeps the mind interested, results in better outcomes. So that is the end of the formal talking section. I'm going to make everyone aware of a few things here and the available resources. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like to do so. I have a YouTube channel where I share lots of videos around Agile concepts, Agile games and things there. I host a regular meetup called the Agile Arcades. That is all around Agile gaming. So it allows people to choose the games they want to play and learn rather than any predefined games. So imagine you're walking into an arcade and spending your virtual coin. You are given the opportunity to do so, and then we'll load up a game and play it accordingly. And if you don't have time to create a retrospective template yourself, there is lots of them freely available on my website to download. And there is a link to download. I think in that link, there are 32 templates you can download with the click of one button. So they are all available to you here. The remaining time of this session, I would like to leave to Q&A. So open to you guys to ask questions about retrospectives, to share your experiences with them and that sort of thing.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. That was awesome.
or you can also choose to play with the playground section and build your own retro template. It's entirely up to you.
I've got a question, but I'd like to hear from other people first.
So I'm going to stop sharing now. Go back to the gallery view. There we go.
See each other.
Any questions, gang?
So I have one. I today, in fact, hosted 4 retrospectives because I'm in the ridiculous situation of doing 5 teams at the moment.
That's insane for a starting point. Congratulations to you. Well done for turning up to this, despite that.
Needed help, needed some inspiration. So because I have those kind of back-to-back, and people have they're really, really busy. The teams are busy. As you can guess, one Scrum Master, we're not super resourced at the moment. So people struggle to action their retrospective actions. They're reluctant, some of them, to be in them. So I've tried to make them a little bit more asynchronous. So do the idea sourcing offline so that they can focus on the ideation, not the ideation, on the voting and the discussion. Just wondering if you had any thoughts on how to double down on that, if that's even a good idea. Because if I were in the office, I would hate to do it that way. I've never met any of the people. Unfortunately, I joined the company in lockdown, so I've never met any of them, which makes it a bit harder because you don't have that relationship. So just looking for any advice you have in that area, really.
Okay, so I would say asynchronous obviously is one of the ways forward in this current world, because we're moving towards a model where it's a work from anywhere, flexible working. We won't always, and especially with globally distributed teams, we won't always have everyone in the office at the perfect time. So anything you can do to ease that burden by enabling asynchronous communication, if everyone's bought into it and understands how it's going to work and why, will be great. If it's just here's a board, chuck some ideas on it, it might be less, it might work less in your favor. But if you've got a team charter, for example, where you've defined what good remote working looks like, what bad remote working looks like, how you can keep each other abreast of information asynchronously, what your preferred approaches are and things like that, then I think that can work very well. And by having remote whiteboards, these virtual whiteboards, you can essentially create something ahead of time with a click of a button, share it, say, hey guys, got a retrospective coming up, add things to this in the next few weeks as you go along. It might be that they don't want to do it in any specific retrospective time, add it as you go along. And then that time that we have time boxed for the retrospective can be focused discussion and voting on the actions. That can work. The consequence, I think, of doing so is that you may lose some of the in the moment discussion. I always prefer in the moment discussions. Things come up that are topical and that sort of thing. The other challenge you'll have is that everyone committing or writing things down ahead of time could influence others, what they say. Challenge as well. The benefit of a virtual whiteboard is people can write their thoughts down without knowing who wrote them down. So you get the psychological safety side of things built in, compared to if everyone was face to face and you can see exactly who wrote up on that on the whiteboard and who put that down. So there are some benefits and disbenefits to it. Again, the starting point for me would be to ask the team what works for them. No one team is uniform in their approach. They'll each have, again, coming back to their microcultures, they each have their own preferred ways of working. If you define with them what works best and work accordingly, you might end up finding that 2 of those teams like having a board they can submit to as they go along. 2 of them prefer to be in the moment, but customize it and experiment until you find out what works for them. Would be my thoughts.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
No problem. Anyone else?
And Chris, I'm wondering, when you touched on that earlier with the idea of enforced fun, people like, oh, I really don't want to do this. It's silly, there's always some, right? And I found people that when they do this, actually they just tend to be just boring people, but you can't force them. It's just how it is, right? But I found, interestingly, some people who are actually quite fun outside of work. They just, once they go to work, they put on this corporate mask, right? Like, now I must be serious, right? I play outside, but not at work. And I find this strange. I don't know. What do you have some thoughts on that? Like, how do you bring them into doing this?
So the way I bring them into this is that I am the first one to demonstrate vulnerability and be silly myself. So I mentioned before everyone joined, last week was Easter Bunny retrospective. I was wearing Easter ears. The week before that, I was doing a snow day themed town hall with 80 something people, and I was wearing my full-on skiing gear. I'm usually the first one to be silly, vulnerable, and as in a leadership position in my company, people tend to respond to that because they feel psychologically safe to do so once I have done so. I'm a huge proponent and believer in bringing your whole self to work, not separating your work persona and your personal persona. And I guess I live and breathe that myself and help create the environment accordingly. And as a consequence, I find people are less likely to stick to that hard-faced way of doing things because they've seen me being silly first.
Cool, makes sense. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that because from my perspective, I've kind of gone through the whole gamut of my working career of not bringing my whole self to work initially because you kind of feel don't accept it and it's in different environments. And you can tell based on the environment that you're in. And for me, the really big thing at the moment for any place that I go to is to have that psychological safety. And it's about helping other people to get to that place where they feel comfortable in sharing as well. So I have found, and it depends on the different teams that you work with, there are also different kind of cultural scenarios at play where people do not feel safe based on, let's say, if they're based in India and they're kind of like, oh yeah, we know that we're like a shared services team and we're only on this kind of pay raise, and you have different people in terms of when they engage with them. It's just that you're not doing your job. And I have found that with that, there is this whole thing of how do you show that vulnerability with teams who they don't really feel a part of a company. And I find that there are lots of people who don't extend themselves to people who are in distributed teams, and it's really hard to get there. And what I found is you have to kind of start very slowly. You have to slowly kind of go, hey, you go with the awkward conversations of when people just not sharing, and then you're literally like, they're like a comedian, like running jokes, until it eventually takes like sometimes a month, even more, before people start sharing. And that's the only way you get to the point of people feeling that they will take part in retros or just in team conversations and they feel safe and that they can trust you.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. And one of those is that fear of conflict, and yeah, it highly enforces or emphasizes that psychological safety element. As you say, it's something you've got to chip away at. You've got to, and it's got to be action. It can't just be words. It can't just be saying that there's psychological safety. You've got to demonstrate it and back up with repeated action, demonstrating you're changing, demonstrating that you're willing to provide that sort of environment. And one of the questions I like to ask, particularly if you've got a situation like that, is I would say, hey guys, what are your strengths as a team? 99% of the time I ask that question, people say communication. And then when it comes to the next few questions and there's silence, I'll say, well, you guys just said you're great at communication. Why are you not talking? What's going on here? And it just kind of highlights, oh, yeah, we think we're great at communication, but actually we're not as good as we thought we were. That I find is a great way to ease into that. But other than that, to me, if you have a situation where it's silent, people aren't talking, first things first, acknowledge it. Hey guys, it's a bit quiet in here. What's going on? If we just hide behind that, odds are it's not going to change. I'm very much, I've been described as an agitator. And I don't know if that was a good or a bad thing, but I think it's because I'm continuously challenging people's ways of doing things. And I'm not just accepting of the way things are just because the way things are. So I will happily call things out, dysfunction as I see it, and say, hey guys, you're calling people resources. If we want to treat people first, you need to stop calling them that. They're people. That's an example.
I had a great joke on this, that when you know, if you call people resources, right, I would call the managers overhead. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Heard that one.
Like it for some reason.
Well, I'm sure they don't. So if I'm a resource, you're an overhead, my friend.
Chris, so that was great. Thank you very much for sharing all that. That was really valuable. What ideas can you share about following up on the actions? So you've agreed 3 or 5 actions. In your retro, you didn't have anything about what did we agree last time and have we done it? How do you follow up? Do you?
So I do. I tend to start retrospectives with asking how we're getting on with previous actions. I limit, and you'll see into the template, I've built in a limit to 3 to 5 actions, because if they identify 15, 20 things, realistically, they can't do all of those things. So I want them to prioritize the things that they can influence and they can actively work on. So kind of the process I use to facilitate tends to select down to the important things they're going to focus on next. And then, yeah, there is a check-in. I haven't built it into the template. Maybe I should. I haven't necessarily needed to in the past, but maybe I should build in a section in a template where it catches up on how we're doing the previous actions. Yeah. In terms of, I said, for me, the tips are, you see them in the retro. First things first, after retro, they're put onto the backlog. They are then considered alongside other items for refinement as part of prioritization. And then ideally, we're choosing a few of them to work on that actually go into the next sprint. That way they're transparent, they're exposed. If anyone's read Atomic Habits by James Clear, he talks about how to build and how to destroy bad habits. And building habits is making them visible. Destroying habits is making them invisible or hiding them. You know, if you are constantly exposed to something, you remain aware of it. If you're trying to avoid something, make it harder to do. And not having it visible is one of the ways to make something harder to do, because you don't remember it. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you.
Okay, was this a book, Chris, you said?
James Clear, Atomic Habits is a book, yes. It's on my shelf behind me.
Can't see it.
Hi, Chris. Do you have any templates that just look at different areas of the workflow? For example, sprint planning or refinement? Because I'm considering, instead of doing like a standard kind of retro where we look back at the last sprint, maybe just focus on different areas that we can improve on the Scrum process.
Yeah, so I don't specifically have templates that do a deep dive on each ceremony in the Scrum world. I'm very much an Agile agnostic, so I guess I try to avoid doing anything that's too ceremony specific to make sure that the retrospectives are more applicable to the wider group of people, and it's more of a reflection on the past few weeks in totality rather than any deep dives. But there's no reason you couldn't create a retrospective that does a deep dive and explores, you know, what does a good sprint review look like versus a bad one? What are we struggling with? I don't have any templates, but I can't see why one couldn't be created.
Okay, cool, thanks.
So Candice, is this more like education then? Like, you know, you're trying to get the team up to speed with Agile in general? And
No, it's a new team that I'm working with that have been working in a certain way for a long time. So I'm just looking at little improvements that we could make within the current process. And as we all know, you know, during COVID and everybody working from home, I'm trying to look for different ways where I can do it without doing another session, another meeting on top that jars people. So I was looking at maybe doing it in a retrospective where we've already got the time block for that. That could actually, we can do that, review an event, and then make some changes for the next sprint and see how we you know, reflect on that and see how, if it improved our ways of working. Yeah,
that's good, because I'm doing lots of ways of working workshops with the team I'm working on, because for the similar sort of reason, or at least it sounds like so I try to do them outside of the retrospective itself, simply because I'm really directing the theme here, right? I'm saying, hey, let's look at this. We're going to tackle that thing, as opposed to a generic, you know, sprint retro. But I can appreciate that this requires even more time out of people's, you know, diaries. Like that could be it could be difficult if people don't, you know, we don't have the time and so on. But maybe it's just half an hour, right? Who hasn't got half an hour at lunchtime? One, you know, once a week or something. and it's kind of a team building activity in a way, right? But a lot more, how would you say, a lot more meaningful, right? Team building activities sometimes is just like, oh, let's go for a meal together, or let's go and play bowling, which is kind of fun, but it doesn't really help you with working better together, right? So I like to do those deep dives separately from retros, but they're like retros, really. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's why my idea of trying to do it in the retro.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, maybe I'll do that.
I mean, if you do create something, do share it. Love to see that. What I'm going to invite you guys to do is, in the interest of retrospecting and iteratively improving these workshops, these meetings, these talks that I give out, I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys. So there is a section on the Miro board with these little shooting stars. The golden ones on the left represent how could the session have been more useful to you. The blue ones in the middle, what did you like or dislike about the session? And the yellow ones on the far right hand side, if you had one wish about the session, it would be. Now, feel free to give me as open, honest, and candid feedback as you like. I'm very thick-skinned. If you thought the session was awful, feel free to tell me. I'll only learn by hearing honest answers. But I'd love to hear what you think. And then I can ensure that the next time I do this, it's as valuable as possible. And you can speak out loud, you can type in their Zoom chat if you prefer, or you can interact with the Miro boards. It's dealer's choice. And this is something I do as well. When I'm doing retrospectives, or often any virtual session, I introduce a topic. I invite the first few minutes to be silent talking or silent reflection where people input onto a whiteboard. That can avoid a situation where someone dominates the agenda for a discussion, certain dominant voices, if you just do it spoken out loud. But I do let people know that if they prefer to do so, they can type elsewhere or speak out loud. So hitting everyone's preferences, basically.
That was a great session, Chris. Really appreciate it. I think that a couple of things which really struck me were your really fun use of Miro. Really enjoyed watching you using that live as we're going through it. An element of preparation, but an element of just getting on with it, which I think is brilliant. And the other thing I think is we were talking earlier about how do you bring people into the atmosphere and the attitude, when they're being a bit reticent and stuff. And I think a lot of it has to do with our own attitudes. And if we just act normally and act, without feeling any uncertainty, I think that has a huge impact on bringing people into our world, whatever that world is at that moment. And I think also if we have a couple of co-conspirators with us as well, that helps as well.
Having some fellow, having a co-facilitator, or someone in the background can definitely help with things. I often find when you're trying to inspire change and action, there's a snowball effect, right? So in the same with anything, you've got the early adopters, the laggers, and so on and so forth. The same applies with any change. You're trying to introduce change, you'll have a few people first off, and then suddenly there'll be a big snowball effect where everyone contributes. And sometimes all it takes is that first other person, other voice other than yourself, suggesting something to make everyone feel confident sharing themselves. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was just reminded me of a great little video I was shared with me, which was the first follower. It's the one of the guy dancing like a crazy lunatic on the side of a hill. And then it's a TED talk, and then it's all about introducing the first follower. And I think that's something that we can do. I mean, coming back to Christina and Candice, I think something that we can do is do a bit of work behind the scenes, as politicians do sometimes. There's the front-facing thing that is, in the Houses of Parliament or wherever, but then there's a lot of work that's happened behind the scenes, so that you're not going in unprepared, and you've got a couple of, let's say, co-conspirators or folks that you can work with. But no, great session, Chris. Really enjoyed it. It's the first time of meeting you, and really enjoyed it. Thank you. Pleasure. I do lots of these free events, workshops, and things like that. So do look out for those. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, you'll stay abreast as to what I'm doing.
We're connected on the
I think we are already, aren't we?
Channel or two as well.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It was awesome. And
thank you for the feedback, gang. I can see some good things coming in here, so much appreciated.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no.
Hi, everyone. Good to meet you.
Oh, just for awareness, I've seen here someone's feedback, more mural templates. So what's happened with that is I always begin creating a template in Miro, and that's because I've been using it for years. It's easiest for me to do. I then started getting requests for them in Mural as well. So I as of maybe a few months ago, whenever I created one in Miro, I duplicated it in Mural. So I have on my website, again, links to my Mural room where you can access Mural versions of these retro templates. I haven't gotten around to the admin task of duplicating every single one I've created in Mural yet, but I will get around to it. But every new one I create going forwards is in also Mural. And also, if you want to, there's a hack you can use if you're a non-Miro or Mural user. There is ways of accessing these templates on any virtual whiteboards, as long as you have access to a snip tool or a print screen or something like that. You can then paste an image in and just put post-it notes over the top of these images. That's another way around it. So for those of you that don't have access to any of the enterprise level tools, there is a hack around. Right, I'm going to leave you guys there. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for engaging with me. Thank you for attending, especially Thomas. After 4 retrospectives, you, my friend, are a hero. And thanks for having me at Agile Oxfordshire.
It was really worth it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, Chris. It was a pleasure. Pleasure to have you on.